There's not a job out there I won't take, so long as the pay's good and a crossbow can solve it.
Greetings and salutations. Wire Guitars back here again with a introduction to all of the ammunition skill gems that we have posted up on the PoE DB2 unofficial website. I just wanted to real quick get into a disclaimer before I go over all of the ammunition skill gems. There is a bit of an anomaly with the ammunition skill gems in particular. You will notice that there are certain skills, namely skills like Ice Shot or Tornado Shot, that do not have an ammunition skill gem tag. They just don't have the ammunition tag. And for that reason, I have not included them in this video. I have only included skill gems or support gems, which include an ammunition tag. So with that being said, and in alphabetical order, let's go over them. We are starting with the armor piercing rounds. This is a level tier 1 mercenary skill. A lot of these, you'll notice there's a trend of mercenary skill gems. These are all kind of associated with the mercenary. For good reason, a lot of these use the crossbow, which is, I believe, like the default weapon the mercenary has. Of course, in Path of Exile 2 and in Path of Exile 1, any class can use any skill. You just usually need to satiate the stat requirements. Usually it's the stat requirements. In these skills in particular, a lot of them will have a weapon requirement of a crossbow as well. But yeah, those are the only real requirements for any ability in Path of Exile 2. But yeah, with the armor piercing rounds, looks like you're going to get, and with all of these skill gems, they're more attack focused. They modify your base attack. The stats associated with them will reflect things like how the skill will affect your attack speed, what it will do, if it'll add crit rate, what it'll do to your attack damage. And armor piercing rounds seems to be no exception to that. Seems to be a very high attack rate ability that nerfs your attack damage. So I'm kind of getting the machine gun vibe. This might have been the skill in the trailer that the mercenary was using to quickly mow down hordes. It looks like it's going to quadruple your attack speed, actually do more than that, 425% of base, but 1/4 of your damage. Looks like the damage conversion rate, though, is overall increase to your DPS. You'll do a little bit more than 1/4 of your damage and attack at a little bit more than quadruple your attack rate. So overall, this skill will increase your DPS compared to just normal auto attacking. Also says hits break 7 armor. Don't want to read too much into that. I don't know the formula, but breaking 7 armor, if that means it's just going to be a flat reduction of 7 armor, then that's pretty good, especially if armor values are a lot more localized and don't get so crazy as they did in PoE 1. If enemies are clocking thousands of armor and this only shreds 7, that could be small. If enemies are only clocking tens or hundreds, then in the shred 7, then this could be, 7% more DPS or something like that. So that could be really good. And then also can fire 14 bolts before reloading. We'll notice that as a trend in a lot of these ammunition skill gems. I think that's the main thing that differentiates them from abilities like Ice Shot, is that these have ammunition tags. They require a reload mechanic. And so with that being said, moving on to Explosive Shot. This one's a detonator skill. I want to highlight the other tags as well, that armor piercing rounds is very generic in its skill gem tags. You just get projectile, physical, attack, and AoE. The Explosive Shot tags are projectile, fire, and it is a detonator skill. The attack speed seems to be posted on the skill gem itself here, that it's going to modify your attack speed to about 70% of its base. An Explosive Shot actually just looks like a single ability. I don't want to say too much here, but if I'm just reading the descriptions of the skills, you see armor piercing round says load your crossbow with a clip of bolts that can be fired rapidly and break enemy armor. Using this skill again reloads the clip, kind of implying that like that machine gun firing thing. Explosive Shot, if you read the text here, loads your crossbow with flaming bolts that explode on impact. The explosion will detonate any grenades in its area of effect. The attack speed being so much lower, it gives me the vibe that the clip, even though it doesn't say the clip that you have for either of these, actually it does for this one, right? We have 14 bolts per clip. This one, we don't get the number of clips. I get the feeling that you're going to have less explosive bolts or explosive shot ammo before you're going to be forced to reload, that you'll maybe have like 3 or 4 bolts. I'm not entirely sure though. I'm just speculating, and I really shouldn't be. So I'm just going to shut up off that point and read the text that we have, or what little of it we have. It's 17 mana cost, again, 70% of your base attack speed. So you're going to be actually firing these out slower than your normal auto attack would be. So it's going to feel heavy firing the Explosive Shot. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting from this text so far. And then converts 30% of physical attack damage to fire damage. And what's interesting about that is it's just a conversion. There is no implication here that your damage gets increased at all. It does come with a knockback. So assuming explosive shot doesn't change, or if this text isn't finalized, assuming that's not the case, well, I don't know why I would assume that's not the case. Assuming this is all we have, this seems quite weak. I've got to be honest with you. Moving on, fragmentation rounds. We have this one is a tier 1 mercenary gem. I guess I want to highlight that armor piercing rounds also tier 1. Explosive shot was tier 7. So just note that. And then also requires level 22. So much earlier on in the campaign, you'll be getting access to fragmentation rounds, which will load your crossbow with piercing bolts that fire in a burst. Bolts that hit a frozen enemy or an ice crystal can consume the freeze or shatter the crystal and cause an explosion of shrapnel. I think we've also seen gameplay footage of this, but it looks like your attack damage is going to get nerfed by 50%, but that if you consume a freeze, you're going to deal 300% more damage. So that's definitely a condition you want to meet. Multiple bolts from one burst can hit the same target, so you have a bit of an AoE effect if you are able to burst ice crystals or frozen enemies. No matter what, fragmentation rounds will pierce 2 targets, it looks like. Fires 10 bolts per burst, so that is going in line with the ammo mechanic that we were talking about. Looks like this will have I think the lowest mana cost that we've seen of 7, and something I am not entirely sure on is if the mana cost is paid for the clip or if it's paid per bolt. But yeah, we go on to high velocity rounds. This is a tier 3 level 5 mercenary skill. I should just say, just in general, this is like a ammunition skill of tier 3 level 5 requirements. Level 5 gem. Level 14 requirement. Load your crossbow with piercing bolts that can consume fully broken armor on enemies to deal extra damage. This thing looks like it's going to hit pretty hard. You got 250% of your base attack damage with a knockback effect. Consumes fully broken armor, as it says in the flavor text, on enemies to deal 150% more damage. So if you are able to break enemy armor. So this seems like a good ability, especially if you can get like naturally, if you can just like deal bonus damage versus armor as a generic stat, because this ability doesn't look to deal bonus damage versus armor. It just deals bonus damage if you have broken a target's armor. So if you can just make your character good against armored targets out in general, or especially, I don't know if this is going to be a mechanic, but if you can give enemies armor, then this skill looks really good. But either way, the numbers on this kind of look nutty. Like it says attack damage 250%. It doesn't mention how it's going to modify your attack speed. But man, if it doesn't, like you have a 6 pierce, 250% base damage ability, which also has a nice conditional of giving you 50% more damage against targets that have armor that's been broken. This skill looks really nutty. So I want to just move on and go to incendiary shot. We have a level 14 requirement tier 3 skill gem for the mercenary. And I think that was what I was trying to say earlier, is that all of these skill gems are for the mercenary for whatever that is worth. But the incendiary shot looks to be sort of a damage over time ability. It says loads your crossbow with flaming bolts that fire in a burst, damaging and igniting enemies on hit and in a small cone behind the area. The attack damage is pitiful. It's only going to do 19% of your base damage, but the hits always ignite. You don't have to screw around with ignite chance, if that's even a thing. And it's going to convert 80% of the fizz that you do to fire damage. It's also going to have a knockback on it. There will be multiple bolts from one burst that can hit the same target. So it has a bit of a shotgunning effect. And then also bolts shatter on impact, dealing damage in a 1.4 meter cone. Fires 10 bolts per burst. I assume that's to reference the ammo mechanic of it. I want to say it's difficult to evaluate this ability without seeing it. I want to say, of course, that's true for everything, but I want to say that's more true for this ability especially, because I want to understand like how does the damage over time effect work, and how quickly does the like how big I know it says 1.4 meter cone, but like how big is that on the screen? I really want to see that. How often is the dot being applied? Is it being applied instantly and doing damage on the very first tick, like the very second it gets applied? Because that's going to matter a lot for clear. 19% of your damage seems really weak, but maybe you can do something with that I'm not understanding immediately, especially since it says multiple bolts can burst the same target. If multiple bolts can hit the same target, then I want to understand the shotgunning properties. I want to understand like how much they spread. Like this ability, I really want to see this ability used. Yeah, with that being said, we move on to many bolts. It seems to be a support gem, which will damage per bolt reloaded recently support. Supported skills deal 1% more damage for each bolt reloaded in the past 6 seconds. So something to support a multiple ammo playstyle, I guess. Like you're going to do more damage if you are changing bolts quickly. I'm not rating this too highly, actually. I don't think this is all that great. This is a rolling 6-second period. Let's assume you're switching between, like, I think 2 abilities is pretty fair to assume a lot of builds will do. I talked about this in another video, but comboing 2 different moves in general seems like it's going to be heavily encouraged in PoE 2, with all the mention of detonator skills, with all the different minion types that seem to do well only when they're in an army that can support them, and that army has to be kind of different in composition. It seems like you'll probably be switching between 2 ammo types pretty regularly in PoE 2, and it's not going to be like a resource generation type thing. It'll be more like a setup and payoff type thing, but that's only 2% more damage, right, for each bolt reloaded in the past 6 seconds. So if you switch from one bolt to another and then you reload both, then you're doing 2% more damage with this support gem at all times. Switch 3 bolts. Ooh, I'm doing 3% more damage. That's it. That doesn't really seem too much. That doesn't seem too valuable, I should say. It doesn't say that it's going to do anything other than increase the requirements of the skill gem that you're doing by 5 strength, right? Right, it's going to increase the support, like the skill gem that you're doing is now going to take 5 strength in addition to whatever else you're doing. But it doesn't say it's going to have like a mana cost multiplier. To be fair, I don't think many of the support gems have said that, but I don't know how I rate this. It doesn't seem too great. I've probably focused on it too long. Permafrost bolts. This is a tier 1 mercenary gem for 6 mana and requires level 10. 15 strength, 15 dex requirement, and a crossbow. Loads your crossbow with icy bolts that fire in a burst, damaging enemies on hit, and in a small cone behind the target. The icy coating on the bolts makes them extremely potent at freezing enemies. And this, as you see, pretty similar text. I'm going to read it all, of course, but pretty similar text. This seems like the frost equivalent of incendiary shot. We have a low base damage, but majority damage converted to cold ability, notably 2% lower base damage and 80% conversion rather than, I guess the same damage conversion, slightly lower base damage, still has knockback and 300% more freeze buildup. This is going to freeze enemies like no other ability, or rather just because it does so little damage. The 300% more freeze buildup is probably just to offset how little damage it does on impact. But multiple bolts from one burst can hit the same target, so you still have a shotgun aspect to it there. And then bolts shatter on impact, dealing damage in a 1.6 meter cone. You've got 10 bolts per burst. Yeah, again, just excited to see this ability actually get utilized. Permafrost bolts seems like it could be great and it could be terrible. We just got to see it. Rapid shot, say tier 5, 46 mana, massive mana cost there. I think that might even be to keep the channeling of the ability up, because I get the vibe that this is going to be an auto, like a shotgun type, or not shotgun, like a machine gun type ability as well. Level 14, 20 strength, 20 dex. You need a crossbow, and then loads your crossbow with a large clip of heavily modified bolts that cause heat to build up on your crossbow, before unleashing a stream of flaming bolts that gain fire damage based on your heat. Heat also grants bonus damage to grenades you fire, but dissipates rapidly when not building up. Using this skill, again, reloads the clip. So yeah, it's going to just like juice your attack speed to no other. 550% of base, that's insane. It's the most we've seen of any other ability. You're going to do a pitiful amount of base damage, 14%, but it's like it said, it's going to convert 60% of that physical damage to fire. So you're going to be doing primarily fire damage. And you can actually fire 70 bolts before you reload. That's also a very large number of bolts per clip. But you're going to be firing so quickly, it's not going to feel that way. Maximum of 11 heat, and you're going to get a lot of base damage actually per heat. Imagine if you have 10 heat, which again, you can only have 11 before weird things happen. But when you get to 10 heat, you get an extra 10 to 20 fire damage just per shot. That's insane. That's crazy with how quickly you're firing these bolts. That's insane. So a lot of this, I assume the rapid shot, you're going to have like an entire play style around this ability and managing your heat, I think. Requires 7 heat to fire bolts, and then grenades consume all heat to deal bonus added fire damage per heat. Per heat too. Jesus, you have an insane potential with damage payload with this ability and grenades, especially if you are able to manage your heat. And that's all I'm going to say about rapid shot. We have stormblast bolts. A tier 9 level 9 skill gem, 24 mana cost, and it shows the attack speed right there. We have 50% of your base attack speed, so you're going to be firing these things slower than you normally would, even just normal auto attacks. Very late into the campaign compared to other skill gems we've seen, you have level 33 skill gem requirement on this with 40 strength and 40 dex also. It is a crossbow ability that will load your crossbow with charge bolts that land around the target location and explode if hit by a detonator skill. So you have the combo skill aspect to this ability as well. Using this skill again reloads the clip, and you have a pitiful amount of base damage, base attack damage of 36%, with 60% of that being converted to lightning. You can fire 3 of them before reloading, and the radius of the impact seems kind of pitiful too. 0.8 meters is... I mean, I haven't seen that in gameplay, again, so I'll be fair and say I don't know for sure, but that seems small compared to other radiuses that we've seen. Charge bolt duration is 8 seconds, and then you fire 3 bolts at a time. So firing 3 is probably the aspect of it that makes it easier to hit. You're going to be firing like rains of arrows, of stormy arrows that are going to come down and bolt I guess. Sorry for the language. And then again, they will explode if you hit them with a detonator skill, which is also probably cool. Gonna have to see this ability comboed with a detonator skill, especially to see the damage potential and see just how valuable this ability can actually be to a mercenary's arsenal. Then we have Window of Opportunity. I believe this is the last ability. It looks like a support gem, but it was associated with ammo, and so that's why I threw it in here. It's a channeling support gem. Supports channeling skills that have special effects if released with perfect timing, causing them to deal much more damage if released with perfect timing, but reducing the perfect timing window. This is supported skills deal 50% more damage when released with perfect timing. Supported skills have a 25% shorter perfect timing window. That's the raw text right there. And the reason I think I included this is because you'll notice a lot of these abilities, or at least some of them, right, have some nature of channeling to them. I think most notably you had like high velocity rounds, or I guess maybe the rapid shot. These seem to have an ability. When we saw gameplay footage of these abilities, they seemed like abilities that you hold down and fire rapidly. So I assume that Window of Opportunity has something to do with that. They did mention also in their gameplay trailers that there was an ability to trigger a reload, and in a small window, probably a perfect timing window, you can click the button to reload like 25% sooner. That's why I included Windows of Opportunities, because I assume it's associated with the mercenary class in that way, and in some way combos with all or some of the abilities at least that we covered here with respect to their reload timers. So yeah, that is all of the ammunition, skill gems, and Window of Opportunity covered. There you go. And yeah, let me know what you want to see next. Otherwise, I'm just going to pick my own thing. GG's.